Some projects just spiral, and this one started when my friend Wolf surprised me with a 3D printed mini Mac case. From that moment there was no turning back, and down the rabbit hole I went, squeezing a Raspberry Pi Zero 2W inside it and pairing it with a WaveShare display to make things properly functional. If you're not familiar with the Raspberry Pi, it's a single board computer that hobbyists have turned into just about anything. Retro consoles, servers, robots, and now, in my case, a ridiculously small classic Mac. But here's the problem. I'm 44. The display is a 2.8-inch 640 by 480 touchscreen, and my eyes, well, they're no longer cutting-edge hardware that they once were. Yes, you can run Mini VMac with a scale factor of 2x, but let's be honest, macOS was never meant to live inside a 320 by 240 window. Everything feels cramped, dialog boxes are claustrophobic, and some software just flat out refuses to cooperate. So rather than book an appointment at my optometrist for a pair of prescription eyeglasses, I did what any rational person would do. I 3D printed a larger case and turned it into a bigger Mini Mac, only this time with a larger case and a much more readable display. But I dare say I'll probably be building an even larger one in a few years' time. Before we start the actual construction of the Mini Mac, we need to get some bits of software together. And this is because the SD card in the case I printed is not accessible without having to unscrew the front plate and retaining bracket, which you'll see later. So for the moment, we'll download the pre-made config file and the drivers for the display from the Instructables website. I'm lazy and love the fact I don't have to manually edit things myself. I ended up downloading quite an old version of Raspberry Pi OS, and that's because I was having issues getting to the desktop once it had booted. But I suspect that that's a me problem, not a device problem. Once the image has finished downloading, crack open the zip file and extract it. Then sit back and watch the progress bar heroically crawl, or if you're lucky, race triumphantly across the screen. Either way, give it a minute to do its thing. After that, you'll need to write the image to your SD card. Use whatever tool you're comfortable with. I tend to go with Balena Etcher because it's simple and very hard to mess up. And personally, I'm going to avoid using the mysterious terminal, unless you're absolutely sure you know what you're doing, as one slip of a command and you could be wiping the wrong drive. Some people prefer the Raspberry Pi Imager, which is also solid, and I've used it before. But in this case though, I couldn't select the ancient version of Raspberry Pi OS that the original Instructables guide specified, and I'm sticking with that for consistency. I'm not too concerned about running outdated software on this build anyway. This Mini-Mac isn't going to be exposed to the internet or running a web server. It's for video playback and vintage games, and that's it. It's a nostalgia machine, not critical infrastructure. Writing the SD card will also take a few minutes, and this is where having a decent modern SD card really pays off. My Mac Mini was pushing over 100 megabytes a second whilst writing, which is surprisingly quick, and it makes the whole process feel far less like you're waiting for paint to dry. Once the image has been written, Balena Etcher ejects the SD card, so I need to take it out of the card reader and reinsert it again, as we need to copy over a couple of bits. And the first is the configuration file, which contains the specific configuration, like which GPIO pins the Pi will use, and which is the default display, plus a few other things I'm not entirely sure of. If you already have an existing config file, however, you can keep that and simply copy and paste the specific parts you need. Next, there are 4 files in a zip file that will need to be decompressed and copied over to the overlays folder, which is in the root of the SD card. These are the drivers that the Pi will load upon boot, and with the config file, the Pi will now use this screen to output over, rather than HDMI. One thing to note though is if you do plug an external display in, the Pi will default to that rather than using this one. If you did want to make any more changes, now would be a good time. I could have printed a different faux floppy drive and install an SD card reader, but it looked a bit too fiddly for me. And I'll have SSH and VNC enabled in Raspberry Pi OS anyway, so it's doubtful I'll have to swap the SD card over anytime soon. But if you don't need anything further, eject the SD card and place it in your Pi. So let's look at the things I used for this project. Firstly, we have the back case shell. It's quite chunky and has a nice solid feel to it. Next is the display bezel, the faux floppy drive which pokes out of the display bezel, and a retaining clip used to hold the Pi inside the shell. We will of course need a Raspberry Pi to power it all, and for this build we need a Pi 3B+. Model 4 and Model 5 boards won't fit inside the case, but if you're clever enough you could always modify the 3D files yourself. I found that with the display plugged in, none of my USB chargers would supply enough power for both board and display, so I bought the official Raspberry Pi power adapter, This outputs 2.5 amps and I get no undervoltage icons on the display. We'll need an assortment of M3 screws and bolts, a short male to female GPIO 40-pin ribbon connector that's about 20 cm long, any longer and it might not fit in the case, and some super glue. I used far too much glue here, and this is the retaining bolt that we'll use to screw the fascia into later. I'm attempting to be clever here by using tweezers to position the bolt, mainly so I don't end up wearing the super glue. Experience has taught me that I can't be trusted with the stuff. I always end up glued to something and picking it off my fingers for the next 3 days. Once it's seated, the glued fit is reassuringly tight. Next up is the faux floppy drive. I had this part printed in black because I wanted a bit of contrast against the white of the case. To mount it, you drop an M3 nut in a recess, line up all the pieces behind the front fascia, and then perform that familiar DIY balancing act of holding everything in one place with one hand while trying to feed up the bolt from underneath with the other. It's slightly awkward, but once it bites, it pulls everything together nicely and feels solid. Whoever designed this 3D model really put thought into it. The tolerances are good, the mounting makes sense, and it doesn't feel like an afterthought, so fair play to them. The original instructions suggest adding a bit of coloured tape over the disc to mimic the floppy disk label, which is a nice touch, and I might have to come back to that. I want to see how the overall finish looks first before committing. Besides, there's a strong chance I'll be taking this whole thing apart again at some point, but that's a problem for later on in the video. The Pi 3B Plus slots neatly into the back left corner of the case, leaving the USB and Ethernet ports sticking out of the side. Around the back you have easy access to the micro USB port for power, a full-size HDMI port and the audio out. There are holes on the bottom of the case if you really want to fully secure the Pi, but honestly the little retaining bracket here in the corner does the job perfectly. The holes at the back are very fiddly anyway, so I'm skipping them. To lock it in place, another M3 nut fits in the retaining bracket. Just hold it with your finger while you tighten the bolt from underneath. Simple, secure and no glue required this time. The next thing is to install the ribbon cable between the Pi and the display. This can only be installed the correct way round so you don't have to worry about which end of the cable to use. I found it was easier to install the cable after I'd screwed in the Pi. You also don't want a long one as you'll end up having to smush it inside the case, and people didn't like that very much in my previous video. The display is held in by friction and doesn't require any screws to hold it in place. There is a post on the right hand side that will stop the screen sliding over any further. And then in the top right hand side of the case, a supporting piece which firmly holds the display in place. I found it's best to go in at an angle when putting all the pieces together. What I love about this build is how clean the inside of the case is. There's only one cable and that's it. I think it would bug me knowing there was a nest of wires inside. The last part is to screw in the bolt that fastens the fascia to the back of the case, and this is why I put the glue in first. It should have dried now, and I'll cross my fingers, eyes and toes that it holds up whilst I screw in the M3 screw from underneath the display. It really doesn't take much to complete this project. There are several fascias to choose from, and I wish I'd gone with a matching SE face rather than this classic one. This is a real speed test to show you how fast the Pi boots and how fast Basilisk 2 launches. I tried uninstalling a bunch of software that came on the image, as I wanted to free up some disk space, but I must have got a bit trigger happy and uninstalled something which broke the desktop, so I had to call technical support in the name of my Linux friend Wolf, who managed to get XFCE working, after a fashion. The application menu icon is broken and I can't change the theme, but these are small things. Whilst fixing the window manager, I asked Wolf if he could compile Basilisk 2 for me. I know Mini VMac is available, and it's a very good emulator, but I have a preference for Basilisk 2. It's just what I'm used to, and I also find it's much more configurable than Mini VMac. The trouble is, I've never got it working properly. So Wolf did his thing, including putting some nice icons on the desktop for me to launch VLC or Basilisk 2. I'd already enabled VNC and SSH, so I can get to it remotely. And I can also use an FTP client to FTP files onto the Mini. And with VNC, I can control it remotely without having a keyboard or mouse connected, in case I want to have it sitting on the shelf somewhere as an interactive ornament. One of the bonus features of the display that I haven't mentioned yet is it's also a touchscreen, so I can use my finger to launch the apps on the desktop, and it's quite accurate, enabling me to interact with menus and dialog boxes relatively easily. I have a preference for macOS 8.1 over previous releases, which is perhaps a little heavy for the Pi 3B Plus, but I wouldn't say it felt any slower than running on an LC475. Now, there is one caveat to this whole build, and that's there's no audio. The Instructables website suggests getting a Bluetooth speaker and pairing it with Linux, but for me this is something that's going to sit on a shelf and will be mainly used for the playback of videos without any distracting audio. Then there's a 3.5mm audio jack on the back, which you could use with some headphones or a pair of external speakers. Of course, plugging in a HDMI cable to a TV would solve this issue, as audio could be routed over HDMI to the TV speakers. The display is lovely and crisp, and whilst it's only 25% larger in terms of the diagonal, the 3.5-inch screen has about 56% more screen area than the 2.8, and that's made a massive difference to usability. It's not been cheap, however. The case alone cost over $50, and with shipping it was closer to $70. The display was $30 after shipping, the power supply was $10 with shipping, and I already had the Pi 3B Plus and a micro SD card, so you might want to think about affordability before scratching this particular itch. So what do I think? Well, I love it. Also, there's a noticeable difference in performance between the 3B Plus compared to the 02W. The Pi 3B Plus has twice the RAM, and whilst they both share a quad-core CPU, the one in the 3B Plus is clocked slightly higher from 1GHz to 1.4. I got the larger 3D case printed in resin, as I was super impressed with some of the other parts I got printed previously. They look manufactured. But sadly, the transparent resin was too expensive for this project, so I went with the standard white. And this is where I need your help. Do I paint it a retro creamy beige, or should I leave it as is? If I did paint it, would I need to use an undercoat first? And is there some kind of special resin paint that I should use? Leave your comments below and I'll take a look. Finally, as it's resin printed, there's no layer lines, which I think adds to the overall look. I'm very happy with the new one, but I'm still super appreciative to Wolf, who printed me the original in the first place. Well, if you've made it this far, thanks ever so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.